watch it at their leisure or send it to somebody that couldn't make it, please do so.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Well, welcome back, everybody, from Cyber World. Welcome back, everybody. You know, digital transformation is one of those catchphrases that I think is used and misused. We're going to hear some demystification of what that means, because we're going to be hearing from Matt Gleason. We're going to be hearing from Mark Norton as they talk about the changing face of the digital enterprise. Matt Gleason is the general manager of CoreSite, and Mark Norton is the managing partner of Vertical Data Center. But we also have, I think, a bit of inside scoop on Mark, do we not, Mr. Gary? So there's something unique here.
So just real quick, we talked about or when I talked earlier this morning, I talked about the need to collaborate and some of the friendships and people that you work with. So coming full circle on some things, I think a lot of us, when we originally started in our careers, didn't necessarily go into IT, but we ended up in IT. So me and Mark didn't originally think we were going to be in IT, but we ended up in IT, and we ended up there. Kind of neat to have him here. So me and Mark have known each other since I was probably about 6, and he was about 7 or 8. His dad was my youth soccer coach. We both grew up over the mountain here in Cornwall. We went to high school together. I recruited him to be my kicker in football, and he recruited me to play wrestling or to wrestle for him, and he was my wrestling captain. We actually both went to Marist College together. We have any Marist alumni? Is LaFrance still here? But Mark was an aspiring baseball player at Marist, while I was an aspiring football, rugby player. We both thought we were going to play for a 3-letter agency in professional sports until life took us in a different direction. So it's kind of neat how we were able to catch back up on social media, LinkedIn, and have him here today. So hopefully from this and other things in your IT world, you're able to make some of those special connections where you have not only colleagues and partners to work with, but friends that you can collaborate with and still also have a beer with sometime that I owe him. So without further ado, Matt, I'm sorry I don't have a great introduction for you, but because this is the first time I met you, but I'm sure we can also have a beer at some time. I don't say no to that. So without further ado, Matt and Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, and for the exact reasons that Gary was mentioning, it's a complete honor to be here. Grew up in the Hudson Valley. My grandfather worked as a foreman at West Point. It's always awesome to come back and have great friends, lifelong friends like Gary, who, you and your team put on a great event today. You've been doing it your whole life, and you were also a tremendous morning announcements guy in high school, and nobody really could quite do it like you. And so thank you to CompTIA and to Gary and the West Point team here. What we're going to talk about, quickly we'll give backgrounds on ourselves, and we'll talk about data centers and internet infrastructure and how it weaves in. Something that I've enjoyed sitting here through the day is getting the different perspectives, the different applications and ways that the internet is used, and that IT teams design themselves to reach the people that they're working with. And you don't always get that at conferences that we go to. Very often it's same story after story, and eventually, you've heard it by lunchtime. So hopefully, we'll be a little bit different. My background is in real estate. I ended up getting into data center real estate back in 2005. Ended up spending some time with Matt, working for CoreSite, which is a data center REIT, and I've transitioned from there. I'm now managing partner of Vertical Data Centers. We invest, operate, and develop inside of the internet infrastructure arena, so subsea cables, edge data centers, carrier hotels, and hyperscale data centers. With that, I'd like to introduce my other good friend, Matt Gleason, who, should I go with the Guinness story? Are you in Guinness? Are you not in Guinness?
No, I'm not in Guinness.
You do hold a record.
I hold a record. I do. I'm the tallest guy that's ever been on a submarine. I don't think that's actually true, by the way, but Mark
I
likes,
believe it.
Mark likes to tell it
Yeah.
that way. Hi, Matt Gleason, General Manager for CoreSite. Mark, you're stealing the thunder there, so I'll go forwards, I guess, with my career. I did spend 6 years as an enlisted nuclear electrician on a submarine USS Connecticut Seawolf class boat out of Groton. Don't worry for the Army folks in the room, though. I was enlisted, so I don't like Annapolis people any more than you do. So after the Navy, I jumped into the data center world sort of by accident, but primarily on the electrical mechanical operations side of things, being an electrician that fit well. I did that for about 6 years for a company called Switch and Data that was eventually acquired by another large data center company. I left there, went to CoreSite, again on the operations side, and that's where Mark and I got to know each other. Last 5 years, I've been at CoreSite almost 10 years. Last 5, I've been on the business side, and at the moment, I'm responsible for the business as a whole and the investments we've made in Chicago, Boston, and New York, New Jersey. So that's my background. Love to talk to you guys a little bit today about just kind of the differences in data center assets, how they're used, and then a little bit about the application side of things, and which bucket of data center they kind of fit into. The slide behind me, and let me preface all this by saying we leveraged CoreSite marketing slides for this, so I am not selling up here, but there will be a little bit of CoreSite selling in the slides, all right? So you have to bear with me.
And part of the reason, outside of me loving being friends with you, was I didn't feel like putting together.
That's exactly
the
right.
slides.
He's lazy.
So thank you.
That's right. I also didn't, which is why I leveraged the marketing ones that we've got pre-printed. What we got up here is this is what happens in an internet minute. Sometimes it's a little bit sobering to look at some of this data. I think we all know kind of, in the back of our minds that this stuff is happening, but 3.7 million searches. You're talking about 375,000 app downloads. Whatever's happening on Tinder, I don't know, married for 15 years, so I don't know what that is, but whatever's going on there, the YouTube videos, which probably like 20% of that is my kids. So just a ton of stuff that's happening inside of that minute. And what's crazy about this slide, and the reason I like it so much, all of this stuff that's in this wheel, that's all industry that's been created in the last 15 years. None of that stuff existed 15 years ago when I first got into the data center industry. And so all of that happens in an internet minute, and it ignores all of the other enterprise stuff that happens in that same internet minute as well. So the volume of traffic that's happening out there is amazing, and that's what flows through these data centers. Specifically, with this stuff is, again, born in the last 15 years, created for an economy and for a populace that's already operating inside of this world. The traditional enterprise, higher education being part of that group, has had to adapt into this. And they've adapted and moved faster over the last 10 years than they had in the previous 90 in order to keep up with all of this. So, Mark, what does all that have in common?
Oh. Well, it's connecting people through data.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
Which happens in our world in different types and styles of buildings.
Did I skip too fast? Sorry.
No, that's all right.
I'm good. Go ahead.
We've got 45 minutes, so
I know.
we can.
I know. I don't want to go too fast.
That's
my
all right.
point, yeah.
It happens in all different types of buildings, and as enterprises have come to us over time, and you're looking for a data center, not every data center is the same. There's carrier hotels, which really is where the peering and interconnection happens. One of the facilities that CoreSite owns, 30% of the internet traffic from Asia Pac to the US goes through that singular building. That building is considered beachfront in our industry. In contrast to an enterprise-grade facility, multi-tenant, which doesn't necessarily need to be on that beachfront, could be more commoditized, but also is going to have some needs of interconnection and peering and leverage of other applications and services in the building. And then all the way to kind of big box wholesale, which is the hyperscale facilities where you'll see Google, Amazon, Microsoft building out 36 to 72 megawatt buildings where they're housing all the compute. So they're really, they're all data centers, each with different functions inside of the marketplace that we're working with.
And that's what vertical really plays in that larger side of thing. That's where Mark and I kind of cross over a little bit. CoreSite really deals more with the telco hotel side of things, where all that internet traffic is happening. We also build the enterprise class grade facilities at scale that leverage those interconnection points for all that business. And then vertical operates on kind of that wholesale scale.
We
Dabbles a little bit.
yeah, we're build-to-suit projects for those
Yeah.
folks.
So that was it. Now I can switch slides.
You're good to
All right,
go.
Good, thanks. So this is a little bit about how businesses have changed and how they've evolved inside of this environment. And then all of this stuff here can be leveraged out of one of the various data centers that we're talking about. And just a couple of examples, and you'll find we're going to do a good bit of this, I think, over the next half hour, is talk about real-life examples and how things have really, really changed in the enterprise space and how they're leveraging these assets to do their business. When you think about retail, I think that's one of the places where we've seen just a seismic shift over the last, 7 years really, and how that operates. You've got your traditional, kind of big box retail companies. I think Walmart's, although they've got a little bit different lean now, but Walmart's, Target's, Macy's, any of those kind of big retail stores, they all have an online presence now. You can buy your stuff online, but they also, for the most part anyway, excluding maybe Sears, they've got physical locations where you can go to as well. What you also have is this whole new entity, and Wayfair is the example that jumps to mind first, a retail entity that is built. Wayfair doesn't have stores. That thing has been built entirely in the internet. It's Wreck-It Ralph for retail. The whole thing exists virtually. And it's really a technology company more than it is a retail company. Their offices are actually in Boston. I've been there. You go there, and it's nothing but 23-year-old programmers sitting at desks in an open floor plan, hacking away at computers and programming stuff. So when you think about how quickly that shifted, how quickly they gained market share, and how much data and traffic they're using, all of that has to flow through one of those data centers. So, a company like Wayfair is going to really use more of that enterprise class facility where they've got room to grow and scale. They can do it quickly because their business is growing so quickly, and their business is all technology. Another kind of prime example that comes up all the time is Major League Baseball Network, which is another one of our tenants. I like to tell this story because people know about MLB Network. It's the TV program, the one where they do all the studio shows and broadcast games. Those guys have a studio in Secaucus, New Jersey, just an hour down the way here. It's actually a really cool building if you've ever been by. But that's where they have done their business since they opened their doors, 15 years ago or so. But again, scalability and is important to them and became critical for their growth, primarily because they really pioneered sports streaming. They were really out in front of everybody else, streaming baseball games through MLB Extra Inning, and they had the ticket, I can't remember what the ticket program was called, but at any rate, they really were out in front of the NBA, NFL in streaming their stuff, which again turned them from a broadcasting company or a more traditional broadcasting company to a technology company, and they needed that scale and that growth. So they came to us, we helped them solve that problem, and they're a tenant of ours. The way they do that actually is fascinating. They film everything out in the ballparks. They film all the studio shows are in people's offices and living rooms all around the country. All that data comes back to their spot in Secaucus, comes over to my data center on fiber, where they actually do all that editing on computers that are inside my data center, and then ship it back over to their building where they actually broadcast via satellite. It's almost a mini cloud, right? They're using my data center like a private cloud, or they're able to access it from their space and do all that editing. So just a couple of examples how fast that has all changed in a couple of business models. I think we skip you here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. Go for it.
You want to talk a little bit, Mark, about kind of those buckets of products and how those are leveraged? What is the cloud? Can you explain it to me, please? I don't know.
Sure. I mean, I know we started off by talking about the cloud. So we've been talking about it for a long time. What was, kind of where were we, where are we now, and where are we going type of commentary. Back around 2013, we started to see AWS deploying, again, talking about the three buckets of buildings here, and Azure and GCP starting to deploy their direct access, direct connect nodes in the carrier hotels. So, locally you're looking at, 111 8th as a carrier hotel, You're looking at 32 Avenue of the Americas, 60 Hudson. And so we started to see, the first exit on-ramp starting to be deployed at that time. And similarly, we were also starting to build, in my career as well, the hyperscale 30 megawatt buildings where as the cloud architects itself to serve the end user, they're mostly leveraging the carrier hotel and the hyperscale facility, and which then forces folks like Wayfair to find those enterprise-grade multi-tenant facilities to try to stream it all together. Again, they don't necessarily need their compute sitting in the carrier hotel, but they need the connectivity from the B to the A to the C. So we started seeing that around 2013, and I just wanted to make sure to set that stage because we're going to talk about some different case studies that we've had with different types of enterprises and how they're thinking and their strategies have changed over that period of time as well. Do you want to touch on your higher education experience?
All of it. I joined the
All
Navy.
of it?
I joined the Navy because I couldn't make it through college, so I don't have a lot of higher education experience. But no, we've done a couple of deals in the higher education space very recently. In fact, we'll show some logos in a little bit. And we've worked on a couple of others that have either not landed or landed elsewhere. And they're kind of a great case study for this hybrid cloud setup, and not just a singular function hybrid cloud, as in a company who needs email support and some other stuff and would set up one hybrid cloud solution. In the education space, there's departments running all over the place doing all kinds of stuff. You've got research entities that require gigantic amounts of compute, some of which can happen in the cloud, but some of which can't because it's proprietary and they don't want anyone to have access to that, so it needs to happen in a private cloud. So they're leveraging that hybrid cloud scenario where they're doing a little bit in the public, a little bit in the private, communicating between the two. You've got enrollments, you've got medical information, you've got financial information. There's a ton of data supported out of a higher education process that has to be stored somewhere, and some of it's a great fit for public cloud, some of it's not. And then specific to the research side, and that's where we've had a lot of experience recently with working with NYU and Columbia and others, where you've seen they're collaborating in some of these research projects with other universities entirely. So NYU is doing a project with Stanford. They're both doing some stuff. They're smarter than I am, so I don't know what they're doing. But they're doing some stuff in both places, need to share that data collectively. But they're also a little bit proprietary about what they're doing and don't want to share all of it. So that's a great fit for that hybrid cloud scenario. They're going to leverage that kind of middle bucket of data center where they've got some scale, they've got some, they can get big on their compute side, but they've also got that access to the cloud where they can either collaborate with other people or share some, or store some data that's not so proprietary. So they're a really great use case for kind of fitting into each of these buckets. So you got public, got private cloud, you got software as a service, and then some of these other buckets, DDoS and protection. That's all your internet security and protecting that private data that they've got to maintain.
And yeah, so similarly with other enterprises out there, the way that they're leveraging, and again, the history here, a few projects that we've worked on over the last 10 years, a number of different insurance companies we were working with and global banking institutions that 8 years ago, they were doing a build versus buy analysis. And I'm sure this resonates as well with many of the universities out there as well. They were looking at 20-year-old 2 to 3 megawatt data centers saying, I really need to spend another $50 million to upgrade this to support future applications. And we would sit in meetings, Matt and I, 12 people across from us, each in their own discipline, telling us why our solution was not ideal versus building for themselves because of security and all the other attributes that come with owning it yourself. And then again, right around, so we had the experience of it, in 2013, building out, the on-ramps and, the hyperscale facilities with the compute. And we were excited about, we're infrastructure guys. We're not, you don't want us to be, maybe you want to program their stuff.
No,
but
I don't, no.
You don't want me trying to configure anything for you. But we were a part of that, the construction of, I think of it as building out the interstate highway system again. So from a Revolution perspective, we are in that component of it. And so as we built out for the cloud folks, magically in 2014, 2015, these 4-year-long meetings that we had been having with global institutions all of a sudden pivoted from, it's not build versus buy anymore, guys. We need to talk about a secure cage and who can I connect to inside of your data center? Which, when that started happening, it was, from our perspective, kind of like your hair blows back, because you went from somebody telling you that they needed to own everything to, you know what, forget putting it in your data center 100%. We're going to put a quarter of it in your data center, and we're going to use the cloud for the rest. And so as we see kind of this migration and comfort with, utilizing the cloud and utilizing, third parties for different workloads, we're also seeing the clouds now reacting to that next generation of builds. At first, it was, cabinets for on-ramps with large hyperscale, and we'll talk in a few minutes here. I might as well just transition myself. Do you mind if I keep talking?
I got it. Go. No, it's yours. Go.
No, that's all right.
Go to the list.
This is the part where I get excited because you're actually talking about stuff that I could do. So we started to see the clouds then pivoting to better serve the customers. And I think an example of this is it's been playing out over the last 36 months in Los Angeles. 5 or 6 years ago, I was meeting with one of the larger movie studios. They were in that similar case that, again, the enterprise is dealing with, the universities are dealing with. They too had the same problem with a 20-year-old 3-megawatt data center. We were talking about how we could help them solve by building it out for them. We could do a custom build for them on site. And then, oddly enough, 24 months later, that conversation stopped, and we built out a large facility for a cloud provider. And you're seeing a lot of disruption in the LA market right now as multiple cloud providers are coming to that market and deploying 4, 8, 12 megawatts, which candidly, as we build out the internet infrastructure, LA is not designed to receive. That amount of capacity is not available, and it's causing problems for those cloud providers to have to solve for. How do I solve for this infrastructure problem to serve a Hollywood studio who has now realized that rendering inside of their own facility 1 movie a year is not really the best use of capital when I can leverage, AWS or GCP or name your cloud provider to render the movies and produce these films. But again, the reason that needs to be in LA, and we're seeing this, in other markets as well, Kansas City, Houston, et cetera, where the clouds are no longer building out massively in Northern Virginia. The hubs are built. Now they need to bring this large-scale compute, 2, 4, 6 megawatts, to population centers to service actual applications. So I think in the spirit of, where were we, where are we now, and then, hey, do you want to take a flyer on where we're going? I think we're in that next level of, from our data center development perspective, as investors, we need to think about, where the puck is going, not where is it today. And, that's what we're seeing as kind of this next evolution as folks build out into those, really kind of customer-based cities.
Yeah, and I think you see the same
Population
thing on the financial side. And we were talking earlier about Flash Boys by Michael Lewis. If you haven't read it, it's a great read. Talks about the spread network coming from Chicago over to New York. But gone are the days of all those white-collar guys screaming on Wall Street inside of the trading pit. Those don't exist anymore. All that trading now is happening electronically. Frankly, it's happening in Secaucus, New Jersey, if you can believe that. But that's where the exchanges exist now. That's where the matching engines exist, and that's where the trading is happening. So again, you saw a really rapid shift from manual trades, people handing things to each other to buy and sell things, to that all happening inside of a data center. and high-frequency trading being the term of the day, and everybody needing to be equidistant from the exchange so that nobody has an unfair advantage in terms of market data or trade speed, to now, where are we going? The birth of the algorithmic trading process and the advent of the cloud sort of happened simultaneously. So those algorithmic trades that are taking in 47 different data points out of the market, probably 4,700 different data points out of the market, assessing them in real time and making an output decision, those programs are being built, tested, modeled in the cloud inside of AWS, and then dropped onto a computer somewhere in, again, Secaucus, New Jersey, where they're actually functionally operating. So just another example of how quickly that process changed. Michael Lewis's book was written 10 years ago, or 12 years ago, something like that. So, in the vein of where were we to where are we to where are we going, I think that the more ubiquitous the cloud becomes and the more comfortable the financial system as a whole becomes with operating some things in the cloud, I think you'll continue to see things pushed out into the cloud, particularly for test dev. And it's an industry that maybe is a little slow to move, and everybody thinks they're smarter than everybody else, and they've got the proprietary things, so they're maybe not going to put everything out there. But I think you'll continue to see a shift to the cloud for everything except for the actual hand-to-hand, or as it were, circuit-to-circuit trading applications. Is there another example here you wanted to talk about? You can see all of our fancy logos up here. It's an impressive list.
I know we could talk about examples all day. I think what we really wanted to emphasize here was that each there's different types of data centers for different types of uses, and as you think about some of the problems that we've seen, and my hope is that nobody in this room has made these mistakes, but when you're looking for a multi-tenant data center with access to GCP, AWS, you name it, you're looking in the right place, because there is meaningful cost difference, whether you're going to a carrier hotel to look for 15 cabinets, or whether you're going to a multi-tenant data center looking for 15 cabinets that might just have exactly what you're looking for. And also, just on a fun story, I know a lot of security was talked about here today. Also making sure that your team practices what you preach on the front end. I don't know if you remember this story, but it's just the most simple thing. This one group, they went through, they had a hack, right? And it was a great big deal, all in the news. And then we helped them move into a data center and make it the most secure place that it could possibly be. We have cameras everywhere. The cage is tight. There's a roof on it. It's down, deck to deck. There's no way to get in, and there's absolutely no way that you could know who this group is, except for on the folding chair that they had propped up against the cage with their name on it, so that everybody, as they walked through, had a billboard as to who exactly was in. So just thinking through the practices that you're preaching as you're going through and implementing all of your exercises. How are we on time?
Whenever you're done, you got another 15 minutes?
We do 15 minutes?
But if you,
We prepped for 30, but
whenever you're done, you're done.
we're good.
We can,
You mentioned different types of data centers, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Can you give us a couple more examples?
Sure. So, I mean, when it comes to internet infrastructure, I'm more of a slow fella. So I need to think about it like, I think of us as being in the logistics business, right? So, sneakers come from China, to the U.S., and then they get shipped across the U.S. The data's the same way. So we're dealing with hubs of processing and distribution to last mile, and so as we think about different data centers, there's the carrier hotel, which sits in a downtown central business district. And that's where all the different networks are talking to each other. So, level 3 is connecting to AT&T. The best way to think about it is in the old-time films when you'd see the operator, and this is your building, right?
It is, yeah.
You see the old-time films, and the ladies that were, hi, I'd like to talk to 463, and then they switch you over. Those same buildings that were used for telephony are still today the buildings with the pipes in them that we're utilizing for internet connectivity. So those are that's the beachfront property in the internet, and those are carrier hotels. Multi-tenant data center, and so there you would see CoreSite's Equinix, Digital Realty's Telex product. Then you have multi-tenant data center, which are 200 to 250,000 square feet of 20 to 30 megawatts worth of cages and cabinets and customized fits inside of there. And what you're seeing is more on-ramps being placed for the cloud at the multi-tenant data center that are then I'm not really the network guy, but then backhauled to the carrier hotel. So you don't need to necessarily be putting your data center inside of the carrier hotel. And the hyperscale, those you're seeing, so regionally, as you think about it, the carrier hotels and the multi-tenant data centers generally live near each other. The hyperscale facilities right now, the real building out of phase 1 of the cloud, that's been happening in a meaningful way in Northern Virginia, the largest global data center market, Dallas, the Silicon Valley, and right now that's, those are the, single tenant, 36 to 72 megawatt facility that you're seeing those folks building out. But there is now, this talk of the edge. And so the next thing that we're following are, there's a big conversation around, can you have containers with compute next to cell towers? Is that required? Is it functionally efficient? Is it, too fine? And, additionally, how do you, in Worcester, Massachusetts, you're going to need compute next to a large population center, or Albany, New York, large population center. You need to have, everybody wants immediate access to their Outlook, et cetera. So building out that next layer of data center.
You talk about everything's happening in real time almost. What type of network speeds are we talking about, and what kind of operating systems are these centers running?
So you're going to get out of both of our. Yeah, so the question was everything happening in real time. What kind of network speeds are we talking about, and what kind of operating systems, I think it was. So it doesn't take very much to get outside of our collective depth, but you've managed to do it. It's
a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I mean, I think you're seeing 10 gig and prepping for 100 gig speeds from a lot of carriers right now, and the big guys, the AT&Ts, Verizons, are prepping for 100 gig. Nobody's selling it. Maybe they're selling a little bit to some very specialized applications, but that's really almost a customized ICB sort of situation at the moment. 40 gig is out there too in some cases. Primarily what we see are the 1 gig, 2 gig, or 1 gig and 10 gig solutions. Certainly you can go less than that. We offer blended IP products, which are sort of blends of internet speeds, or of internet or carriers, I should say, in the 300 meg range. But most of what you're seeing is 1 and 10 out of data centers. In terms of operating systems, that's more on the application level, which is really where, below where we go, both of us actually. It's a fascinating industry because really we're in real estate. That's what we do. It just happens to have a very technical lean to it. But once you get past the cabinet level and you start getting into rack and stack and operating systems, we leave that to our customers. We like to bring in folks that can help them do that, other customers that can help them do that, but it's not really our core process.
So people actually come into your centers and put their hardware in there?
Absolutely, yeah. We sell, cabinets. Mark was talking about cages and megawatts and everything else. That's really what we do. We own, and just to give you a sense of scale, because maybe that's a better, we talk in megawatts because that's what our industry talks in, but the rest of the real estate industry doesn't. When you talk about a carrier hotel, you're talking about a 40,000 square foot floor of a building in Manhattan. When you talk about that mid-size scale data center, enterprise class, you're talking about maybe a 200,000 square foot, 2 or 3 story building in Secaucus or out in Somerville outside of Boston. And then when you talk about the hyperscale stuff, you're talking more on the, how big? 300, 400,000?
Oh, yes.
Square feet, yeah. I mean, so you're talking a much bigger building potentially. And inside those buildings, there's obviously electrical mechanical infrastructure, but there's also, to your point, cages and cabinets and rooms full of servers and IT gear that the companies are operating. So they're just leasing the space and power from us.
I'm really dating myself here, but post 9/11, it seemed like data centers were
We live that.
Yeah. We did. We lived Sandy too. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That was probably a little overspoken at the time, to be honest with you. If you go back to the data center industry and at 9/11 in that time frame, really the data centers all existed in central business districts anyway. I don't think they moved out because of 9/11 necessarily, although maybe that started the trend. I think really going back to Mark's point about the cost and where does the application need to live. I think two things happened. One, fiber just became more prolific. People started putting fiber in the ground. When you start putting fiber in the ground, you can start connecting things to it, and it makes that whole process of operating a data center outside of a central business district that much easier. So I think the proliferation of fiber and then just the cost savings that I as a landlord and you as a tenant can get by operating the stuff that doesn't need to sit right next to your office somewhere other than right next to your office. So I don't know that it was post 9/11 necessarily. I think it happened in that time frame, but I don't know that it was 9/11 so much that drove that. That being said, I don't know, you want to talk about risk. I mean, everybody's so risk averse right now, and that always comes up with us in central business districts specifically. So when you think about kind of the hyperscale stuff that you were talking, why are they in those places?
Well, part of the reason Northern Virginia took off the way that it did, I think, was a little bit of, a reaction to that, right? Its cost of power is significantly cheaper. So you're talking, 30%, 40% of TCO savings, total cost of occupancy savings, just, putting your facility in Virginia versus in New York, New Jersey. And so, you have seen, the banking institutions did go there in a major way. But we've seen it coming back. I think New Jersey and the New York Metro is primed to see probably its best year in about 4 to 6 years.
Yeah.
Where it's all application driven. As much as you wanted to move your compute away from the population center, I was on a panel with somebody that, they graduated from a very good school and said, but it moves at the speed of light, so you can put it anywhere. And I believe that that's right, but the people that we work with who are smarter than us tell us that they need to be near the people, and that's, just what we're seeing happen now, and that's why you're seeing this resurgence in the major metropolitan areas, just because the amount of workloads that need to be processed and the distance of shipping it back to Virginia and back again. If Microsoft is going to make us all share Excel, we expect it to work as well as it did on our laptop. So they better be able to have some sort of solution that's, such that we can't even feel it.
And when you think about, again, in the theme of where are we going, when you think about autonomous vehicles and you start to think about AI and you think about some of those applications that are really not on the horizon anymore, they're kind of here. You think about autonomous vehicles, those decisions can't be, the decisions required to drive a car remotely or automatically rather, can't take the time it takes to ship those data points to Virginia and back to make that decision. So they've got to be at the edge, they've got to be where the car's driving, almost literally where the car's driving. So yeah, to Mark's point, you see a shift back, I think.
So how concerned are you about the physical security of the data center as opposed to the security of the data that's in the data center when you're building out a facility? I think I saw something about the Google facility in Belgium and how large and massive it was, and there's like 8-foot thick fences of concrete, and so is the physical to get into it, the operational security to try and get to the data. How are they building that out in the areas that you pick to be a data center?
You want it?
Go for it.
All right. Again, and this is a little bit going back to your question, that split between where we sort of hand off everything. We handle both of the companies handle the physical security side of things. Gates, badge readers, biometric readers, security officers roaming and doing tours and taking logs and all that kind of thing. But stop short of actually handling cybersecurity side of things, the data security piece of that. That's where we really partner with other folks, and that's one of the kind of the buckets of why people use one of these 3 data centers. It is important. Customers do care about that. Depending on their application or their business, they may care about it more or less. I think what I see more than anything is people are colored by their past. So if they've had a security incident of some kind, then they're significantly more worried about it than if they haven't. standard industry design is some sort of perimeter fencing. It doesn't need to be concrete block. It doesn't need to be K-rated. It just needs to be some sort of, keep the strays out kind of fencing, with a gate, with a badge reader. Physical security officers when you first walk into the building, badge readers and biometrics to get into anywhere important. And then,
Man traps.
what's that?
The man traps.
Yeah, man traps, you see those some, those went away and came back, that kind of fluctuates in the industry a little bit. But the big hyperscale guys, they on their end, I think they're doing more standardized stuff, and man traps are probably part of their standard too, right?
Yeah, I mean, on the single tenant hyperscale, those are probably the most locked down facilities you come across, even during the construction process. Even if you're a part of the company and you want to get on site, you can't get on site unless you have a reason to be there. That's both because of the information they're protecting, the certifications that they have to adhere to, and then also just the proprietary nature of not wanting the competition to know what's happening inside of your four walls. So I'd say it's one of the top 5 questions that we have to be able to execute and perform on.
It is pretty varied though, and actually the NYSE data center is right in Mawa. You can see it off of 17 if you're coming south, I guess, or sorry, if you're coming north. And it's a concrete barrier, bomb sniffing dog, armed guard kind of place. Not everybody necessarily fits into that mold, but that's their security profile. So it really is application and company dependent a little bit at least.
So the cloud offers us incredible opportunities to scale, host, compute. It's our fast, right? So I have a small data center here, and small is probably not small enough scale to describe, given the discussion that we've had today. But cloud is my fast, right? If I can rub money on the problem, I can go out there and I can do things and stand things up very quickly, and I have that opportunity. What's your fast? Do you have a fast? I mean, what's above you? Because your timing matters, right? I'm sure building these things is not for the faint of heart, right? When you think about all that, never mind what you're slamming into the building, right? What's your steam valve? How do you react when you need to provide service? Whether as a network within this set of properties that you have, or you're just providing service for a particular client.
So different scale has different timelines. I think that the projects that I'm working on are going to be more in that 9 to 18 month timeline, where those are more custom builds. When you're talking about, I'll let you answer the question, but I'm imagining like 60 cabinets and below.
Yeah.
That timeline is significantly different, and you should.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a single cabinet worth of gear, and I can have a cabinet stood up, powered, and internet connected in about 3 days if I need to. Obviously there's a lag time there. You've got to buy gear, you've got to program gear, install a rack and stack and all that. But for the piece that I do, the real estate side of things, really we can have it done in a couple of days and faster if we needed to. Sorry. Go ahead.
And along with that, on the network side, the point of these buildings is that if you try to go, secure network from level 3, whatever your requirements are, there's going to be this, long lead time. The point of, going to a site like CoreSite is they're already pre-deployed in the facility. So it's a cross-connect that, whether it's CoreSite, Equinix, or whoever, they have a technician that can go in 24 hours, which it really isn't 24 hours. They're just adding in that time to cover themselves. They need to have a technician show up, make the connection, and you're off and running. So that's really probably the longer lead time in the tent there, that by going to a multi-tenant data center, you're scaled up and down, rather quickly.
Yeah, I mean, to connect a new building, so if AT&T's not on net here and you called them and said, I need you, they probably have fiber outside off your property, but they would need to bring something in and connect it and spin it up. They're going to quote you 60 to 90 days to do that. To Mark's point, they're already in my building, so we can do that in less than 24 hours on the connectivity side of things. And then for the real estate side, we can turn it up pretty quick too. Do we have another? Sorry.
5G coming onto the scene, and I'm presuming you'll probably like 6G, 8G, all that down the road, and the fast speeds, supposed to be internet 2.0. Well, security, I think people are going to transmit more amounts of data because of the faster speed.
Yeah, so, so the arena that we work in is the receiver of that information, right? So with the deployment of 5G, you're talking about, 5G antennas being, placed in buildings, blocks apart and transmitting. But the product that we work in is that data needs to land somewhere inside of a metro. And so from a security perspective, that's going to be more on T-Mobile, Sprint, Verizon, whoever you're using. And then they will backhaul to us where, again, we'll provide the physical security. But the data protection, that's going to be on them. And I'd love to speak for them with what my thoughts are, but I probably just hold it there.
Sorry, your question's valid though on the data volume side though, because that is something that we're prepping for now as we think about where we're all going. I think we all recognize that number one, internet traffic isn't slowing up, and number two, the ability to send more faster is only increasing. So that means that, to Mark's point, we're only going to get more data faster, and have to make sure that we can solve for that in a scalable way.
Yep.
With the emergence or popularity of electric cars, apparently data centers will be consuming a lot more energy. What kind of energy infrastructure do you need, and how do you guys, what kind of redundancy do you have in the building?
So it's a great question. So on the infrastructure side, I think that the different utility companies are planning for some better than others. The pending wave of power demand. People in our industry have always been concerned about, well, who's going to invent the server that needs less energy? And you know what? They could invent that product. That's great, but the wave of data that is coming in is going to outweigh whatever the new invention is. That's just what we've seen. So from an infrastructure and energy perspective, different municipalities are really responsible for trying to monitor that, and some are good, some are great, others are behind. And I think I referenced one of those cities today. And then your second part of the question was
Around redundancy, that's
redundancy.
right up my alley. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll take it from the engineer. So from a redundancy perspective, the data centers are building out. It used to be 2n plus 1. For every one thing needed, you had another backup and so on. As performance times for data centers remain at like 5 nines to 6 nines performance. Outages we find are coming from human error, more so than electrical grid. So you've seen, in response to just the cost of building out all that redundancy, the redundancy levels have been getting watered down, because what you find is you can still have the same level of performance without all that additional weighted cost. And then also what you're seeing is, especially if you're referencing self-driving cars and critical applications like that, and you especially see it with a group like Oracle or Alibaba. When they're building out in a market, they're building out 3 different cloud nodes of 4 to 6 megawatts apiece, and they're all kind of redundant inside of the redundancy that we're providing as well. So I think the resiliency is both the physical, but it's also the customer with their applications and their designs as well. Did I do it, boss?
You did it fine, yeah. Well done. But I would, given the venue, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we're tackling the people side of that by hiring veterans. We've hired, don't boo me, but a ton of Navy nuke guys, but also Army prime power to come in and operate those systems because, to Mark's point, what we've seen is that the systems are so advanced at this point, and we've built them out so redundantly that that's not where your failures are happening. Your failures are happening from a guy going and opening the wrong breaker. So we've focused on hiring people who are used to operating in situations where mistakes are, have much more dire consequences than the lights go out, and then they bring that to our data center.
Basically, the idea that they're hiring people who used to run the IT systems or the systems for needy stuff because they were very good at making sure the power worked, and then heat
that's absolutely right. And it's not the guys that handled IT systems, but the guys and girls who handled electrical mechanical systems. Yeah.
Various systems, not just the IT.
No, absolutely. Yeah, the